all of you lovely cat aspirants. I hope you guys are doing very, very well. And I mean it when I say, with just a counted number of days for the cat examination, I know how every tick of the clock must really be, pumping your heartbeats. But the one thing that's going to anchor all of this anxiety is going to be your preparation. So I hope your preparation's sailing smooth. You're riding high on the mocks. You're getting a decent score, at least the kind of score that you think is required for being able to qualify your dream college. And while all things other are also important, the preparation for CAT is in no way at the hindsight or at the back foot. So at this point of time, you have to be on what we call the war footing. And to be able to enhance your preparation, we've come again with another very quick, very nice, very interactive, and very important reading comprehension around the Aeon passages. I'm sure by now you must be loving the series, and this must be adding so much of value in terms of, how should you be orienting yourselves with the multiple genres that we have the passage. From genre, it reminds me that today I come up with two of my favorite genres. Why? Because somehow I like understanding the perspectives of what people carry, aka the opinions, and I like how these personal opinions form, shape, and actually become the dictum of the society. So something that I get very happy reading, well, I'm assuming if I can get very happy, why not you guys? So the topic that we have today are, there are going to be two. So there is art and aesthetic. So please expect a lot about art and culture and society and anthropology and all things around it. And we have ethics and morality. The one thing which we are always torn between. Should we do this? Should we not do this? Is it ethical? Is it moral? So it's going to be a load of personal opinion that's going to come into play. Of course, there will have to be factual content, but to be able to understand a genre like these, we have to be open to embracing multiple mindsets, because the authors are going to be very hell-bent on the way they want to pitch the idea, and they would require us to be able to give them that leeway so that they're able to penetrate into our minds and be able to imbibe their thought process. So if we don't have a very welcoming and we don't have a very generous reception towards these passages, it might get difficult for you to be able to understand. So keep your minds and your heart open, because we're not only going to evolve culturally with the two passages today, we're also going to understand how to tame and understand the mindset of the author, because these are specifically the kinds of things you must expect in the two specific genres that we're going to be picking up today. So without any further ado, I know the excitement must be building up. Let us begin with the very first passage that we have. The instructions remain the same. I am first going to walk you through the information of the passage. We'll speed that up a little and then move on to the questions, check for the answers, the options, what is right, what is wrong, why is it right, why is it wrong, and then simply begin. So let's start. The first one. Classical music and high European culture were at the heart of Theodore Adorno's philosophy. So we are here catering to Theodore Adorno's philosophy, for whom classical music and high European culture made two very evident, very significant, they were two very significant milestones. Outlook on life. He was born in 1903 in Frankfurt in Germany and grew up with music, both as a listener and a practitioner. So he was both. He used to listen also, he used to practice also. His mother, Maria Cavalli Adorno, was a singer, and the young Adorno was a talented pianist. So this is how they made a very lovely duo. He attended the Horsch Conservatory, going on to study with the Austrian composer Alban Berg. So he also went ahead to be, attending the Horsch Conservatory, where he learnt with the Austrian composer. Adorno chose a career as a professional philosopher, taking a position at the University of Frankfurt in 1931, but music and culture remained the focus of his interest. He went on to becoming a philosopher, but the two things that really always grabbed his interest were, of course, music and culture. Adorno insisted on high standards. Culture was not merely a matter of technical progress in composing more beautiful, more complicated music, for example, but also, if indirectly, a matter of morality. So he went about, when he always insisted that one should have very high standards. and for which he went about by saying that culture was not merely a matter of technical progress. It was, in fact, something that was also a matter of morality. Music, like all culture, could either develop or obstruct social progress towards greater freedom. So music, just like culture, could be something which could either develop or it could obstruct. A very important idea that he has gone about by saying, that is, what could music possibly do? And that progress was under threat, which means the culture and the music seemed to be under threat. Even in pre-war Vienna, Adorno saw warning signs of a collapse in European culture. So there was a decline in the European culture. He would later write to Igor Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, which premiered in 1931, that it represented an uproar of culture against its own essence as culture, which is enjoyed as an enticement precisely in its opposition to civilization, to which he had later also written. Later he would also write to Igor Stravinsky's Rite of Spirit seems to have been, probably some sort of a musical depiction, or whatever was being able to premiere the whatever was able to display the cultural aspect of something. So it could be like a show, it could be like a musical event, it could be like a short movie. We still don't know, but it was being premiered, which is enjoyed. So, and in double invert and in single inverted comma, which means it must have been quoted by our very own Theodore. It was enjoyed as an enticement. Enticement means something that attracts you. So it is enjoyed as an enticement precisely in its opposition to civilization, because it is against the civilization, which is probably why it is going to be enjoyed. The ballet's flirtation. So we now understand it was a ballet. So the ballet's flirtation with barbarism was not merely musical, it reflected social facts and indeed showed evidence of a kind of cultural trend towards regression and the domination of the individual by the society as a whole. So in fact, the way the display of it was being done showed how the culture seems to be eroding in today's times, in today's society, and how there has been regression. Regression is the opposite of progression in the society. Now these trends towards regression and domination were born out of the rise of Nazism. Why did all this happen? It was because of the rise of Nazism. Adorno's father, Oscar, was Jewish, and Adorno's license to teach was revoked by the Nazis in 1933, leading him to spend 4 years at Oxford studying a doctorate under philosopher Gilbert Ryle. Because his dad was a Jewish, his teaching license was also taken away. Together with the Institute of Social Research in Frankfurt, Adorno emigrated to the US, eventually settling in the Los Angeles in 1941. The philosopher who had savaged Stravinsky was now brought face to face with Mickey Mouse. In Minima Moralia, 1951, Adorno wrote, despairingly, every visit to the cinema leaves me against all my vigilance stupider and worse. So he was not somebody who was very fond of this idea of cinematic production, because he feels that it just leaves you more stupider and wiser. Like many emigres are again people who tend to go from their own country to another. Adorno was initially disoriented by US mass culture, which had not yet overrun Europe as it would after the war. So until now, maybe US had not overstepped or it had not gone as far as what Europe had, but he was pretty amazed by the kind of culture. He felt very disoriented. He always felt like, okay, what am I doing here? What are these people doing here? This disorientation became a principal distrust, and this is what caused him distrust. He claimed that capitalist popular culture, jazz, cinema, pop songs, and so on manipulate us into living empty lives of true freedom and serves only to distort our desires. So these are all nothing but canvases of empty desires. So they are just going to be the kind wherein we are not really living the kind of life, the respectable life we should. In fact, these are all empty lives. Popular culture is not the spontaneous expression of the people, but a profit-driven industry. It robs us of our freedom and bends us to conform to its needs for profits. It's a profit-driven company. The reason why they do what they do is only to be able to rake in money. It is not a display or a representation of our thoughts. This distrust of the US culture was reciprocal. So this distrust that he had, it was reciprocal. Both Adorno and his philosophical collaborator, Marx, were broadly Marxist and were promptly placed under surveillance by the FBI. So then comes the FBI, and that they were under radar. Their telegrams were intercepted, and one of Adorno's co-authors, Hans Essler, was called before the House un-American activist community in 1947 and deported. And one of the guy was also deported back in 1948. The FBI distrusted Adorno as a transplant from the Marxist background into a capitalist one. So the FBI always distrusted, thinking that he's been transplanted from a Marxist background to the US. Now, people distrust him as a transplant from a privileged background into a progressive one. And now people also began to distrust him by thinking that he's been somebody who's come from a privileged background to a progressive one. The early response to Adorno's condemnation of popular culture is to dismiss Adorno as a snob, to which the author says that the easy response is just dismiss him, say he's a snob. A snob becomes a person who's a hedonist. His dislike of mass culture becomes simply a dislike of the masses that he looked down upon. And the reason why he disliked was, I mean, one can always club it like that, it was his dislike that came along. He seems patronizing, seeing people as easily fooled and misled, and popular culture as shallow and manipulative. So he went about by saying that the reason why popular culture is not my thing is because it is manipulative and shallow. In this version, Adorno's argument against popular culture contained no insight, only elitism, while in fact popular culture pleases and gives a voice to ordinary people, to which the author says that it seems as if, he was simply being critical because he had this air of elitism to himself, and which is why he did what he did. But in reality, all of this culture also gives voice to the ordinary people. So that is what the passage is about. And with that, let's get on to the questions to be able to see what our answer is. Which of the following most accurately describes Adorno's objection to US popular culture during his time in Los Angeles? Break down the question. Always have a review of what you want as the answer and then go ahead. So if the question is asking which of the following most accurately describes Adorno's objection to US popular, so why was he against this entire popular culture? So we know for a fact that he always considered this to be a profit-making entity, that it was manipulative, and that it really did no good. It led people shallow lives. It ensured that people live shallow lives, and it did not do much to the society at large. So that's the kind of answer that we want. Let's see. He viewed it as a spontaneous form of collective creativity. No, there was criticism. This can't be an answer. Let's drop it here. He considered it as manipulative, profit-oriented industry that distorts desire and constrains genuine individual freedom, something that we just wanted. Let's reserve this. He rejected it for lacking the complexity and the moral substance of European high art, making it inherently inferior. Okay. No. It is the author's contention as to why he feels that maybe he had a sense of elitism. That's why he went about this, degrading and disregarding the pop culture altogether. But I mean, that's not something, that has been inherently said in the passage, and that it is inherently inferior. Again, he did reject it, but then with rejection came the criticism. It was not all route rejection altogether. So this can't be an answer. He regarded it as harmless entertainment. No, he was against the idea. So it was not about harmless. In fact, he says that people do get influenced by it, and that's how they make it. It tends to be making them shallow as people. So the correct answer over here becomes option B. I hope everyone's understood this one. Let's try the next. Which of the following best captures Adorno's stance and the cultural significance of the rite of spring? So what sort of an understanding, or which of the following is going to best capture his stance? So second paragraph is where the mention of this is being done. And he went about by saying that something like this can be appreciated, but what is going to happen is this is going to be giving a very different aspect of the society altogether. Let's see. It was a legitimate innovation in modern music that harmonized with European cultural tradition while encouraging social freedom. Okay, now towards the passage, we did talk about all of this, but then it did not give how the society was progressing into. They went about by saying that all of this is being done. Why? Because the man is trying to create a dominion of his. And that is why. So that reflection is very important. So legitimate innovation is what it is going to be. Now that's not what it is. Again, over here, throughout the passage, he's just been criticizing. So we want that kind of an answer. This can't be. It was a symptom of artistic experimentation whose complexity risked alienating the general public from appreciating the true culture. No, that's not what it is. In fact, he went about by saying as to how the culture is on a back foot. There's no progression, there is regression. So this cannot say that they're appreciating. It was an instance where musical expression mirrored and reinforced societal tendencies towards cultural regression and collective domination. Well, yes, musical expression, why can we say that? Because it was a ballet. Remember, so this should have been your hint for it. And all things that we have, definitely let's reserve this. It was a controversial ballet whose artistic provocation lay entirely in its. Okay. To express it again, it was not controversial. He had his own notion about it, which means the correct answer is going to be option C. Easy questions until now. Let's see what do we have next. From the passage, which inference is most consistent with Adorno's broader cultural philosophy? So what is that we can infer about his broader cultural philosophy? Let's go again. Artistic work should be judged primarily by their technical innovation. No such mention. What is not in the passage is never an answer. Out of scope, A hata do. Cultural products, whether high art or mass entertainment, inevitably reflect and influence the moral and the social conditions of their time. Well, yes, that is what it was, and which is why he was so critical about, this entire culture that the US adorned, because he felt that it speaks volumes of the kind of people that are there. So, of course, this is something that can be understood. Let's reserve this. Popular culture's greatest value lies in its inability to democratize access to art by catering to the taste of the majority. Now, no such mention of democratization or serving for the masses. The social utility of an artwork depends chiefly on its capacity to entertain. No, he was against the entertainment angle. In fact, he went about by saying what US people in the US do is merely entertain, but that's not what art is. It loses its opinion and its depth altogether. So there is only one which talks about the moral and the social conditions of their times and how it is a reflection. So the correct answer over here becomes option B. Okay, and on to the fourth one that we have. All of the following were consequences of Adorno's Marxist background as described in the passage, except, this is very easy. So give me the one that is false. He was placed under FBI surveillance during the time. True. If it is true, it can't be an answer. Why was he under surveillance? Because he was a Marxist. He had a Marxist background. He and his associates faced direct government surveillance, including interception of private unke telegrams intercept ho rahe the. Bilkul, this is true. Can't be my answer. He was summoned before the house. He was not summoned. His friend was. So this is clearly false. Makes the answer. His co-author Hans Eisler was targeted as anti-communist measures, resulting in legal and political repercussions. Yes, they were sent back. This is true. It can't be my answer, which means the correct answer is going to be option C. I hope this one was absolutely clear. A very interesting passage at that. And with that, let's get to the next one, which is going to be about morality and ethics. Let's go. Now, none of the classic questions of philosophy are beyond a 7-year-old's understanding. So everything can be understood by everyone. If God exists, why do bad things happen? Agar Bhagwan hai, to bura kyun hota hai? How do we know there is still a world on the other side of the door closed? Are we just made of material stuff that will turn into mud when we die? If you could get away with killing and robbing people just for fun, would you? The questions are natural. It's the answers that are hard. And like everybody has these, various questions. But it's the answer that we have to it which is very hard. 8 years ago, I'd just begun a series of empirical studies. Empirical means anything that is based on evidences of the moral behavior of professional ethicists. So he started with accumulating. The author started by accumulating, journals which are going to be speaking about the behavior of the professional ethicist. My son Davy, then 7 years old, was in his booster seat in the back of the car. So, the car seat that is there. What do you think, Davy? I asked. People who think a lot about what's fair and about being nice, do they behave any better than other people? Are they more likely to be fair? Are they more likely to be nice? So these are the kinds of questions that were asked to Davy. Davy didn't respond right away. Davy was like, okay, I'll be quiet. I caught his eye in the rear view, to which the author saw in the rear view mirror. The kid who always talks about being fair and sharing, I recall him saying, mostly just want you to be fair to them and share with them. So this kid who is always talking about all things that are fair and sharing, I recall him saying, and the author is like, no, I always remember him saying that mostly just want you to be fair and with them to share. So that's something that has been preached, and that's what, even the child has auto pilot mode pe. This is what he always goes by saying. Now, for the first time, of course, he didn't have an answer. Now, when I met an ethicist for the first time, by ethicist, I mean a professor of philosophy who specializes in teaching and researching ethics, it is my habit to ask whether ethicists behave any differently from my other types of professors. Most say no, they're like, aap kuch alag hain kya? To which they say, no, hum log yahi hain. I probe further, why not? Shouldn't regularly thinking about ethics have some sort of influence on one's behavior? Like आप क्यों नहीं अलग हो? इतना ethics सोचते हो तो आपके तो अंदर एकदम imbibed होगा ना वो चीज. Don't it seem it would? To my surprise, few professional ethicists seem to have given the question much thought. But surprisingly, even the author was surprised कि हाँ बहुत लोगों ने इस पर गौर तो किया जरूर है. They'll toss out responses that strike me as flip or are easily rebutted, but then they'll have little to add when I'll clarify. So बोलेंगे तो हाँ यार क्यों नहीं किया, but they will not have a lot of content to be able to add. They'll say that academic ethics is all about abstract problems and bizarre puzzle cases with no bearing to day-to-day life, a claim easily shown to be false by a few examples. So they'll say, no, these are about these very special scenarios. These are not something that can be applicable to day-to-day life. But the author goes to say, no, that's not fair. There are a lot of ways. Aristotle on virtue, Kant on lying, Singer on charitable donation. So we have examples of people for whom we can understand. They'll say, what do you expect? Epistemologists to have more knowledge? Do you expect doctors to be less likely to smoke? I'll reply that with an empirical evidence does suggest that doctors are less likely to smoke than non-doctors on similar social and economic background. And then he's just trying to contest by saying, just because you're a doctor, do you smoke less? To which the author is like, yes, I have evidence which shows that those who are non-smokers versus the doctors are going to smoke less given the setup that is there. Maybe epistemologists don't have. Epistemology also becomes the study of the people who are going to be studying the nature, the habit, the society, how all things evolve from there. So maybe epistemologists don't have more knowledge, but I'd hope that specialists in feminism would exhibit less sexist behavior. And if they didn't, that would be an interesting finding. He's like, okay, I don't want them to be wildly different, but say, for example, if you are somebody who's preaching feminism, then you should not be a sexist. And if you are, then that, in fact, it intrigues me. कि आप पढ़ाते कुछ हो और फिर हो कुछ और. I'll suggest that relationships between professional specialization and personal life might play out differently in different cases. To which he's like, ki, maybe what you teach, what you do, and personally are going to be two very different cases altogether. It seems odd to me that our profession has so little to say about this matter. And it's like, it seems very odd. Why does it have so less to say? We criticize Martin Heidegger for his Nazism, and we wonder how deeply connected his Nazism was to his other philosophical views. But we don't feel the need to turn the mirror on ourselves. So we're like, सामने वाले पे तो उंगली उठा लेंगे, आप कैसे हो, आप इतने ऐसा प्रीच करते हो, क्या हरकतें हो, मतलब कोई खुद नहीं सोचता है. One wouldn't want to introspect and look inwards. The same issue arises with clergy. In 2010, I was presenting some of my work at the Confucius Institute of Scotland. Afterwards, I was approached by not one but two bishops. I asked them whether they thought that clergy on average behave better or the same or worse than lay people. About the same, said one. Worse, said the other. No clergy person has ever expressed to me the view that clergy behave on average morally better than lay people despite all of their immersion to religious teachings and ethical conversation. So they're like, they are no better. In fact, they're worse than the normal people. Maybe it is, in part, this is modesty on behavior of the profession. So the author is like, maybe they're just being modest. But in most of their voices, I also hear something that sounds like genuine disappointment, some remnant of the young adult who had headed off to seminary hoping it would be otherwise. But then he also, he's able to locate the side, the one that maybe they also went thinking things are going to be different, but in actuality, there isn't. So that is just what the passage is about. And with that, let us go. Beautiful passage and a very relatable passage at that as well. So let's start with the questions to be able to see. Which of the following most accurately reflects the author's concern? So what is the author's concern? That what you preach, what you, study for, are you the same person or are you a different person? So that's the kind of discontent he has. Let's see now. The public's unrealistic expectation about personal morality of philosophers. It's not about the public's unrealistic. Let's remove this. The apparent disconnect, which is there, between professional engagement and with moral concepts and actual moral behavior. Yes. Because if you are something that you preach, then why aren't you that person otherwise? And that is what probed him to write this. Definitely an answer for me. The role of empirical research in determining whether ethical training improves. We're not talking about anything that's going to improve the society at large, out of scope. The decline in moral standards among academic and religious professionals over recent decade. No, it's about understanding. Are you what you study or are you a different person from what you studied? So the correct answer over here is going to be option B. A very lovely passage. I'm still gloating about the idea of the passage. It is that good. Let's go to the next. Based on the author's description, a genuine disappointment in the clergy's voice most plausibly reflects. Let's see. Bitterness in their moral authority has been undermined by nobody has undermined. It's just that there's a disappointment. Why? Because even when they went ahead, they thought that there's going to be a change. It's going to make them a better person. But what has really happened? That's the kind of idea I want. Irritation that moral shortcomings in clergy receive more public attention. No, it's not about the public attention. Regret that their theological training did not equip them to resolve doctrinal disputes more effectively. Doctrinal is going to be back precedents, principles. That's not what we want to do. So I think by elimination, sad recognition that the moral improvement they once expected from a life in ministry has not materialized. Perfect. This is what our answer is going to be. Let's get on to question number 7 and see. From the exchange between the narrator and his son, which of the following inferences is most strongly supported? So the kind of communication what is it that we can infer? So children who appeal to fairness generally do so out of self-interest rather than from consistent commitment to fair principles. No, that's not the kind of idea that was being pitched out. Can't be my answer. Children's understanding of fairness is often incomplete because they base it primarily of their own immediate experience की बात नहीं हुई क्योंकि ये बच्चा तो ऐसे preach किया गया था, ऐसे ये morals, ये values उसमें imbibe की गई थी. Children who talk about fairness do not necessarily behave more fairly towards others than those who remain silent on the topic. Again, that's not what it is, I think. Among children, invoking fairness may function as a persuasive tactic to secure personal advantage rather than as an evidence to genuine moral conviction. So he was being taught because his father always told him this is what he wanted to do. But when he was given external scenarios, he didn't really know a lot. He didn't know what to do. He was mum. Not because he didn't have an answer, but because he didn't know what to do in that scenario. So our answer is going to be option D. And just the last one over here for this passage. What is the author's primary purpose in presenting a list of philosophical questions in the opening paragraph? So why has he done that? To show that even deep philosophical questions are easily apprehensible, even if their solution remains intractable. Very well, yes. That these still exist, these are still there. We don't have answers for these, but then these are there and these are there, and everybody makes for an answer. Let's reserve this. To suggest that children are okay, the first paragraph is not about children. Let's remove this. To argue that the complexity of philosophy lies in the formulation of questions rather than no. All of these were asked in the first paragraph itself. Last line, what was said is we have questions, but do we have answers? No. So it was definitely for the resolution as well. To demonstrate that modern philosophy has failed to address the most basic, no. It's about the fact that everybody has these questions, but where are the answers to these questions? Because clearly we are still apprehensive of even if their solution remains intractable. Can we get a solution ever or not? So not being the answer, which means the correct answer is going to be option A. And with that, we come to an end to this amazing session. Well, I had a lot of fun. I hope it did do immense value addition for you guys as well. I'm going to see you guys very soon with another interesting genre. But now that you know what to expect out of it, I'm hoping that you're going to read extensively Solve. Now, these were passages from Aeon, abridged though, but yes, these were something that were there. And if you wish to read, I will have the link pinned in the comment and that you can always go and read the article in entirety. Thank you so much for giving me your valuable time. If you like this video, please hit the like button. Share it with other like-minded friends who are also preparing for CAT and who feel that, they're not able to explore genres. This is, of course, the best way to be able to do it. And stay tuned because this series is super exciting and we have a lot more coming up. Thank you so much, everybody. Please have a very good day and keep going when it comes to your preparation.